How's it going, guys? Winter Kills here, and welcome back to another guide video. If you guys haven't seen them yet, I've put out a few guide videos in the past few months, one for Speedroids and one for Mech Knights. So if either of those decks interest you and you want to learn more about them, I highly recommend you guys go check out those videos. A lot of effort and detail went into them. And again, if those archetypes interest you, I covered a lot about them, so definitely go check out those videos if you haven't. But today I'm very, very excited because we're going to be talking about what has to do one of my favorite decks of all time, and that is Atlantean Mermail, a deck that I've been playing pretty much since October of 2015. But before we get any further into this video, I do want to let you guys know a few ways that you can support the channel. If you're looking for any TCG accessories, check out Imperium Duelist at the link below. They offer a wide variety of products such as sleeves, deck boxes, dice, binders, apparel, and playmats, including my very own playmat, Blazing Permafrost, which is on sale now. You can get all of these amazing products for 10% off using my discount code WinterKills10off at checkout and support the channel in the process. And of course, if you guys are shopping on either TCG Player or drawface.com, do not forget to use the affiliate links I have to their sites down in the description of all my videos. If you guys shop and check out using those links, a small bit of the revenue from your purchase will go right back into the channel, which helps out greatly, so I can continue to make you guys videos like these on a regular basis. But with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into this Atlantean Mermail guide video. It's going to be very long, very detailed, and one thing I want to point out now is that the entire video timeline at the bottom of your screen should be broken up into segments so you guys can go around to different parts of the videos, because it's going to be separated into various different segments, talking about an intro to the deck, deck profile, combos and replays, other engines and techs, and, just my final thoughts on it as a whole. So make sure you guys pay attention to that because it'll help organize all the information that's going to be in this video, because again, it's going to be pretty long, pretty detailed. So if you need to jump around to different areas, that's a way you can do it. The timestamp should also be in the description of the video too. Okay, so this segment of the video is basically just going to be a little bit of an intro to Mermails, its history, and basically just what the deck is in general. Mermail is a deck that I would consider to have somewhat of a cult following, especially with how long the deck has been around. It has definitely withstood the test of time. It just always seems to be a decent rogue contender, no matter the format. I mean, not to mention the fact that the deck was extremely powerful back when it first released. Megalo was $100 a copy, and it was definitely a tier 1 strategy. Obviously, since then, in that time around 2013 or so, the deck has declined in popularity due to power creep and other just better decks becoming available. But the deck is still, to this day in 2021, in my opinion, a decent rogue contender, and it just always seems to be that way. So for those that don't know, Mermail is a strictly water-based strategy that has been around for quite some time. It originally received some of its first cards ever in Abyss Rising and in Cosmo Blazer, and also received plenty of very, very crucial support in the realm of the Sea Emperor structure deck. The deck is mainly known for its ability to OTK, and since it has a lot of access to in-engine removal, clearing boards to do said OTKs is oftentimes never really a problem for the deck. But that's not to say it can't go first, because the deck does have access to a wide array of incredibly powerful extra deck monsters that it can access turn 1 to put out game-ending boards. These cards include Abyss Dweller, totally awesome, Bahamut Shark, Trishula Dragon of the Ice Barrier, and True King of all Calamities, just to name a few. And of course, who could forget, the deck is also notoriously known for being able to hand loop the opponent with such easy access to cards like Trishula, Mooling Glacia, and the newest card, Deep Sea Minstrel. The deck, since its inception, really hasn't just been mainly Mermail. It's been a hybrid of both the Atlantean and the Mermail archetype, as these two strategies go hand in hand. Some of the more prominent Mermail monsters often require water monsters to be discarded in order to activate their effects, and the Atlanteans have proven time and time again to be the best discards for said Mermail monsters. Atlantean Dragoons can provide unparalleled surge power, while Atlantean Heavy Infantry and Marksmen provide access to some incredible in-engine spot removal. And of course, not to forget, Deep Sea Diva is one of the most powerful cards ever to grace this strategy. as it has a tremendous ability to kickstart OTKs and very resource efficient combos. The deck also received Neptibus the Atlantean Prince in 2016 out of a set called Breakers of Shadows, and this card helped to accelerate the Atlantean strategy even further and quickly became one of the best starters for the deck outside of Deep Sea Diva. Up until this point, I've talked a lot about Atlanteans and Mermail sort of functioning together as one cohesive unit, but that's not to say that the Mermail engine can't function well on its own. In fact, there were very, very popular builds of Mermail very early on in the deck's existence called Mono Mermails. And it was called this because the main deck was filled with extremely high amounts of Mermail monsters, creating sort of a monster mash type feel to it. These builds were very successful and dominated a few formats way back when. What we see in today's current format are Mermail builds that play way fewer Mermail monsters with the main deck, but we still end up playing some of the absolute best Mermail monsters that we have access to. Now, to wrap up this introductory segment, I just want to go ahead and say that Mermail has been lucky enough to be able to take advantage of some of the most powerful water cards ever printed, strictly because of its generic synergy with anything that's water. Such cards include, but are not limited to, Tidal Dragon Ruler of Waterfalls, Elder Entity Norden, and Fishborg Blaster, just to name a few. All cards which are currently forbidden. And lastly, the deck has also seen its fair share of cards on the Forbidden and Limited list. Such cards include Mermail Abyss Gund, Atlantean Dragoons, and Deep Sea Diva, all of which have since been unlimited for us to enjoy, and enjoy you will. So that's going to pretty much wrap it up for this introductory segment of the video. Now we're going to go ahead and get into the deck profile. Alright, so welcome to the deck profile segment of this video. So I have for you guys an extra deck, main deck, and full side deck for this particular format here in January/February of 2021. Now keep in mind, this is my own personal take on the deck, so you're going to see some things in here that might not be typical for every single Mermail list. I will go over the basics and, the cards you will pretty much see in any build of Mermail Atlantean. We'll go over those cards and why you might want to include them into most, if not all, Mermail Atlantean builds. But this is my own personal take on it. This is the Deep Sea variant. I'll definitely be showing you guys some other variants of Atlantean Mermail because there are quite a few of them, but that'll be for a future segment in this video. But we're going to go ahead and get into this, and we're going to start with the main deck. This part is going to be pretty long, but I'll try to be as quick as I possibly can. So first and foremost, we have 3 Mermail Abyss Teus. Easily a 3 of that you will find in pretty much all Mermail Atlantean deck profiles, just because it is single-handedly one of the best, if not the best, Mermail monster in the game. It is a special summon that can hit the board just by discarding 1 water monster. That is a very low cost, especially when compared to its other counterparts, Mermail Abyss Megalo and Mermail Abyss Lead. Megalo taking 2 and Lead even taking 3, and I believe Abyss Baleen needs 4. So you can see how this is the most resource efficient one, and when it is special summon, you get to add a level 4 or lower Mermail monster from your deck to your hand. So you can add Pike, Dine, Gund, Mander, you name it. This card can search out some of your other key superior and additional extenders, sometimes even starters, out of the deck, and it's just a fantastic card all around. Level 7 that we can use to make rank 7s with, or level 8 synchros if need be. So 3 Abyss Teus, again, you'll find that in pretty much all builds. Megalo is a card that has been in varying numbers over the years for me. I used to play this card at 3, then I went down to 2 for a long time, and now I find myself at 1. Although I wouldn't mind playing a second copy, because there are some games where being able to search out another one of these is actually really crucial. And the fact that you don't have it kind of slows you down a great deal, because this card is an absolute powerhouse. Again, takes 2 water monsters, to discard to be able to summon it. When it is special summoned, you get to add an Abyss spell or trap from your deck to your hand. So you can add Abyss Gale to Mizuchi. You could add the Abyss Sphere from your deck to your hand. You could add Abyss Squall, you name it. There's a ton of cool Abyss cards that you could add. And then it says you contribute 1 other face-up attack position water monster as cost. this card can make a second attack during each battle phase this turn. Now, one other thing I want to mention too, before we go any further, a lot of these cards will say you can discard one other water monster to the graveyard and then semicolon, which indicates that you are doing that as cost in order to even activate the effect. And the Atlanteans, the other complementing engine for Mermails, all of them get their effects when they're sent to the graveyard to activate a water monster's effect. So they're being sent as part of the cost for the effect, part of the activation requirement of the effect, and not as just a part of the whole effect itself. And that is what will trigger Atlantean monsters, etc., etc. Just for those that are unaware, because it is a bit of an important ruling thing. Cards like Swap Frog won't trigger Dragoons, but cards like Megalo, Teus, Abyss Pike, and Minstrel, and Neptibus will trigger their effects, so on and so forth, because they do send for cost. But Megalo is a card that I think should be at 1. Again, could be at 2, depending on your personal play style. Because drawing this card is not really that great. You can search it out very easily because it is a Sea Serpent thanks to Atlantean Dragoons. So I think 1 is perfectly fine. It's a very, very good sort of powerhouse card. Can provide 2 discard outlets to resolve a ton of effects. And with its, tribute to attack twice effect can pile on quite a bit of damage. Then we have Abyss Pike here. One of the other Mermails, one of the other few Mermails that we are playing. When this card is normal or special summoned, you can discard 1 water monster to the graveyard as cost. Again, add 1 level 3 or lower water monster, add 1 level 3 water monster from your deck to your hand. So this can search out your Gund, can search out Marksman, can search out the Deep Sea Minstrel, could search out Gen X Undyne if you're playing that. So this card can, again, provide a discard outlet to give you the opportunity to trigger some of your Atlantean effects, and also be a starter, and not to mention, of course, it can be searched off of Teus. Pike, I find, is a very valuable card to still have within the main deck, even to this day, even with Deep Sea Diva at 3, just because, again, this card can be, in some cases, a safer play than going with something like Diva or just Prince, because this card will hit the field, and no matter what, you're going to be able to discard for cost and potentially trigger a card like Atlantean Dragoons, which can be the difference being able to keep playing or not keep playing. And then it, gets you another card in the process, which is really nice. It's a level 4 water, helpful for making rank 4 Xyz, etc., etc. Then we have Gund. Gund is a huge staple in Mermail. If anything, if you're not going to play Pike, you gotta at least play Gund if you're running Mermails, because if this card is discarded to the graveyard, period, not to activate a water monster's effect, if it's just discarded to the graveyard, you can target 1 Mermail in your graveyard except itself and special summon it back to the field, and that is really huge, especially when you might be using Megalo per se to discard Gund and Teus or Gund and Pike. You can just use the Gund to revive the Pike, etc., etc., and then use the Pike effect on summon to keep going. So Gund is just amazing for recursion and bringing back some of your Mermail monsters from your grave, whether it be Megaloteus or even something like Abyssalacia that might be in your graveyard. Now moving on here, we have one of the stars of the show, one of the main stars of the show here, of course. Triple Deep Sea Diva, a card that, ever since it's been at 3, I've been playing it at 3. When it went to 2, I was running 2. Now we have full access to this card, which is insane. Single-handedly one of the best starters within the entire deck. When it is normal summoned, you can special summon 1 level 3 or lower Sea Serpent type monster from your deck. This card, again, is a start to a lot of combos, can start a lot of OTKs, just because it gets extra bodies to the board in a very, very easy way, just tutoring them out straight from the deck, which is very nice. And not to mention, this card's a tuner as well for some reason, so you can use it for synchro plays, or you can use it to go into the almighty Crystron Halqifibrax if you feel the need to do so. Then next up, we have 3 copies of Neptibus, the Atlantean Prince. A really, really good starter for the deck, a close second compared to Deep Sea Diva. But this card does have its flaws, of course. But basically it says once per turn, you can send 1 Atlantean from your deck to the graveyard except itself as cost to add an Atlantean from your deck to your hand except itself. And then if it's sent to the graveyard to activate the effect of a water monster, you can target 1 Atlantean monster in your graveyard and special summon it. Now keep in mind that is a mandatory effect, it is not optional. So if you for some reason don't want to revive something out of your grave, you're gonna have to anyways. You don't have any choice. You will revive an Atlantean from your graveyard, which isn't always bad. It's a very nice, it's like a Gund, if you will, but for Atlantean monsters. But this card is great. You know, it can bridge the gap between, you know, your Mermail monsters and your Atlanteans. You know, being able to instantly trigger Dragoons like that to add Megalo and then get another Dragoons to your hand to be able to fuel said Megalo. It's just really, really powerful. It just gives you such easy and direct access to Atlantean Dragoons, which I think is probably the heart and soul of this deck. If this deck did not have Atlantean Dragoons, it really would struggle to function, in my opinion. But Neptibus, again, incredible card. A card that should 100% always be played at 3, no matter what. Its only vulnerability, though, is that it doesn't get its effect when summoned. It's just a simple on-field effect that can be activated at any time, which does make it vulnerable to some trap cards, some forms of removal. For, say, if you go Diva into this, and then they use Dogmatic Punishment to send Entis, they can pop both Diva and Prince before the Princess even had a chance to activate, which can be pretty devastating sometimes. Next up, 3 Atlantean Dragoons, again, heart and soul of the deck. And it basically says all level 3 or lower Sea Serpent type monsters you control can attack your opponent directly. That effect really doesn't come up, to be totally honest, because you're always going to just be putting Dragoons into the graveyard. But then it says, when this card is sent to the graveyard to activate a water monster's effect, you can add 1 Sea Serpent type monster from your deck to your hand except itself. So single-handedly the best searcher in the entire deck. And, you know, we have Neptibus and be able to gain instant access to it, discarding it off Teus, discarding it off Megalo, whatever it may be. This card is just phenomenal and helps to search out a lot of cards. You know, don't be surprised if you find yourself going through all 3 of them within a singular turn. That's how you know you've had a pretty productive turn. So next up here we have Atlantean Marksman and Atlantean Heavy Infantry. These cards you'll tend to see pretty much always in Atlantean Mermail strategies, but you'll always find them at varying numbers. Infantry is usually the more popular one because Marksman is only good at dealing with set cards, and those aren't really always super prevalent. Again, it depends on the format. If there are more control decks in the format, if there are more trap heavy decks in the format, which is kind of something we're seeing now, you know, Marksman is more favorable. But if not, usually just playing 2 or even 3 copies of Infantry is usually what you'll see in standard builds. But right now, I'm on just 1 and 1 because these cards can brick because they really don't do too much on their own. And again, they are very easily accessible by Prince or Dragoons. So getting these cards to the hand at whatever time you need them usually isn't a problem. But Marksman, again, if it's sent to the graveyard to activate a water monster's effect, you can target 1 set card your opponent controls and destroy that target. And if it attacks and does battle damage to your opponent, you know, you can special summon a level 4 or lower Atlantean Sea Serpent type monster from your deck, and that can just get Prince right out of your deck, and sometimes that's actually what you need. So sometimes Marksman might actually be saving you from getting access to Prince when otherwise you wouldn't be able to get access to it, so that is a nice little plus. And then Infantry, again, if it's sent to the graveyard to activate a water monster's effect, you can target 1 face-up card your opponent controls and destroy that target. These are mandatory effects, so even if there are no set cards on your opponent's side of the field or face-up cards on your side of the field, these cards will still technically activate, so keep that in mind. So if you have a Dragoons, like if you're summoning Megalo turn 1 and you're pitching Dragoons and Infantry, you can still go Chainlink 1 Dragoons, Chainlink 2 Infantry, Chainlink 3 Megalo, because this card is mandatory and it does have to activate, so you can use it to potentially Chainlink block your Dragoons and be able to get that search to go through. So heavy Infantry, Marksman, staple cards in any Atlantean Mermail build. Just the numbers that you play them at do vary. And then here we have some other engines that are usually commonly played within the deck. I am currently on the Swap Frog engine, consisting of 3 Swap Frog and 1 Ronin Totem. It's like a good pseudo starter for the deck, if you will. I find a lot of times that the deck does lack other good engine starters and extenders. There's a very limited pool of like really decent, you know, Mermail and Atlantean cards to play. We are pretty much playing all the best ones that we can. All other Atlantean and Mermail cards really aren't the greatest, so you have to find something else that fills that void, that gap within the deck. You can't really shove too many spells in there that will lead to brick hands eventually, because again, you have so many good cards in your deck that require water monsters to be discarded to activate their effects, and you can't use those effects if your hand is clogged with hand traps that are non-water, or if they're clogged with other traps and spells, you know, just lead to brick hands. So having an engine that can be, you know, used as discard fodder, but also do something on its own is really, really nice. So we've looked to the Undyne engine in the past with Gen X Controller, but we also look to the Swap Frog engine as well. because this card, while it doesn't trigger Atlantean effects, it can still set up cards like Gund, you know, pitching a Teus or a Megalo off of it, bouncing it back to the hand, and then pitching Gund off this, and then chain blocking the Swap Frog with a Gund to bring back the Megalo and then send off the swap to get access to it totally awesome, is really, really nice. So, and even if you open the Swap Frog with another Swap Frog or Swap Frog and Ronin Totem together, that means if you have something like Prince or Diva in your hand, you can basically protect them from any hand trap, which is really, really nice, and also get a water monster back in the process due to Totally Awesome's recycling effect that it has in the graveyard. So I've been a huge fan of the Swap Frog engine over that of the Undyne engine. Yes, Ronin Totem can be a brick, but again, at the end of the day, it's still a water monster that if we need to, we can just discard off of any of our water monsters within the main deck. Next up here, we have another engine, one of the newer additions to the Mermail Atlantean strategy, the Deep Sea cards here. Deep Sea Minstrel being one of the more prevalent cards because we can discard it and one water monster as cost to look at our opponent's hand and banish one card from it face up until the end of that turn. So that does a couple of things. It provides us with another discard outlet to potentially be able to trigger our Atlanteans, mainly that of Dragoons, and also give us crucial hand knowledge of what our opponent is on, and potentially be able to rip a card out of their hand that might just stop our combo outright. Cards like Nibiru, Gamma, whatever it may be, just try to rip or force those cards out of their hand and, you know, resolve the Dragoons and continue to play and get Deep Sea Diva and, you know, potentially removed the threat that Diva would have had to face otherwise and have it go through uninterrupted. But that's not all this card does. It says if it's special summoned, you can mill the top 3 or send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard, then target one level 4 or lower water monster in your graveyard as cost, except itself as cost. So again, it will trigger Atlanteans there. Place it on the top or bottom of your deck. That effect really isn't used too much in most builds, but I found a way to make it work, as it sometimes is another way to extend and oftentimes trigger Dragoons, and not only trigger, but recycle Dragoons back into the deck, which is very advantageous, you'll find as you play this deck more and more, which is why I'm playing Pot of Avarice in the main deck, and we'll get to that in a moment. But my build, again, is more of a Deep Sea themed build, so I try to take advantage of that effect when I can. And then we have Deep Sea Artisan. Again, mainly plays into the Deep Sea strategy, especially when we talk about one of the synchros that we're playing. It says if this card is added from the deck to the hand by an effect of a water monster, you can reveal this card, look at your opponent's hand, and then if this card is special summon, you can send the top card of your deck to the graveyard and then target one level 4 or lower water monster in your graveyard, except itself as cost, again, so that will trigger Atlanteans. Special summon it, but negate its effects, and then you can only use each effect of Deep Sea Artisan once per turn. So it's a really nice extender that sometimes can just bring out another water monster from the grave as another body to be able to keep extending with, so that's why I like this card. Yeah, sometimes drawing it sucks. I might cut it at some point. I'm just not sure what, maybe for a third copy of the next card you're about to see, but I really do like this card. Again, at the end of the day, it can just be a water monster to be discarded off of your other good water monsters like Teus, Megalo, etc. But next, we have 2 Gameciel, the Sea Turtle Kaiju. I kind of wanted this deck to be all gas, no breaks, and I do really want to go first with this deck. Yes, this deck can go second. I played it to go second in the past, blind go second, and try as hard as possible to OTK. But I prefer much more this format with all the decks running around like Drytron, Elvic, Virtual World. I find it much safer, and especially with Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, I find it much safer to be able to go first, so I can decrease my chances of having to try and to play into those cards. But you know, it's not a perfect world. You're going to have to go second sometimes, game 1. And you do want something in your main deck that can combat those powerful cards. And Gameciel is the card to do it. Not only because it offers sort of unparalleled removal in the form of tributing the monster, but it is a water monster, which is so important. That's the problem with other hand traps and removal cards within these that you can potentially play in this deck, is that they oftentimes contribute to bad hands. While yes, you're slowing your opponent down, you're also slowing yourself down, which can be bad because it doesn't give you an opportunity to act on the worse off state that your opponent might be in. But the thing about Gameciel is that, you know, if you need to, you can just discard it off Megalo, discard it off Minstrel, discard it off Teus, whatever, and you can at least continue to play while also have the opportunity to be able to stop your opponent's plays in the process. So Gameciel, I think, hands down, is one of the better, if not the best forms of sort of counterplay that you can main within the Mermail deck. You could also look to Ghostwood and Spooky Dogwood or whatever it's called, but I don't really like that hand trap too much personally. I often save a lot of the board breaking cards and other hand traps for the side deck and putting them in there if need be. Next up, we have Lapis Dragon and Fishborg Launcher. Just some tuners for the main deck because we do a lot of synchro summoning, and of course Halqifibrax is in the game as well, so having access to good tuners in the main deck is kind of important. Lapis Dragon, if it's added from the deck to your hand, you can reveal this card and special summon it. It's a Sea Serpent, so again, we can just search it off of Dragoons, add it to the hand, and special summon it. Or even if we draw it as our 6th card or whatever, we just draw it for turn randomly, reveal it and special summon it, because that will count as being added from the deck to the hand. And then if it's added from the graveyard to the hand by a card effect, you can special summon it again, but it also gets banished when it leaves the field. So this card can be nice to be able to get an extra body on field, to be able to go into Halqifibrax or make synchro plays with. Fishborg Launcher tends to be my go-to target to summon off of Halqifibrax because you can get sort of double use out of it, synchro into Adamancipator Risen Dragite with it, and then bring it back to be able to make a potential link play. So that's why I really like Fishborg Launcher. And then we'll go into the spells here. We have 3 Deep Sea City, Megalantica the Deep Sea City. This card mainly specifically works within my Deep Sea build. You won't see this card in a lot of standard, I would say, Mermail Atlantean builds. If you want to hear me go into more depth and about this particular build, you want to see me play this particular build, I put up tons of Dueling Book content of me playing this deck on Dueling Book Rated, and you'll get a good idea of how this build particularly runs. So if you want to check that out, click the annotation up in the top right, and you'll be able to see the deck in action if you want. I've uploaded a testing sessions video as well, so links to those will be in the description or up in the top right of this video. But basically this card says, when this card is activated, you can place 1 water monster from your deck on top of your deck, and then it says once per turn, you can target 1 water monster you control. Its cost increases its level by 1 or 2 until the end of this turn, even if this card leaves the field. And then once per turn, during your main phase, if you special summon a water synchro monster, you can look at your opponent's hand, and if you do, banish 1 card from it and face up until the end phase. So this card does 3 things. It can level mod, which is great for synchroing and Xyz plays. It can stack the top of your deck, again, for Deep Sea Minstrel, which we talked about earlier, stacking Dragoons and then milling it and getting a search and recycling a card in the process, or stacking Prince, summoning a card, recycling a card in the process, which is what I usually do with this particular engine. And then, you get to rip another card out of the opponent's hand, potentially to shuffle back into their deck off of Deep Sea Prima Donna. Then next up here, we have 2 copies of the Pot of Avarice. Recycling resources is second to none in Mermail. A lot of times you will find that the grind game of this deck isn't that great, because once you burn through all those Dragoons and your other powerful cards, you're going to have very, very slow turns, and Pot of Avarice is just the card you'll need sometimes to breathe life back into your deck so you can keep playing and keep grinding. So I really love Pot of Avarice. I like it a little bit more so than Moray of Greed at this current time. Double Triple Tactics Talent. I realize this card is expensive. It could be swapped with another Gamma Seal and maybe another Pot of Avarice if you want. But Triple Tactics Talent, I love. This deck can be hurt by hand traps, and having this card to be able to potentially play through them is nice, giving the deck more draw power to potentially be able to see the field spell, which my deck has an emphasis on, is really nice, and also help you to potentially win games you have no business winning. And you can also help to hand rip more cards out of your opponent's hand. Minstrel is doing that, Megalantica is doing that, and you can also use Triple Tactics Talent to do that as well. And then we also have Terraforming, 1-for-1, Upstart Goblin, and Mizuchi, Abyss Scale of the Mizuchi. Terraforming, obviously, to search the field spell. 1-for-1, obviously, to see Prince more often. And then Upstart Goblin for consistency. And then Mizuchi is our search target off of Abyss Megalo. This card is really, really good. I'll talk about it for a second. It's just the way the card is worded. It says equip only to a Mermail monster. It gains 800 attack, and when a spell effect that was activated on your opponent's side of the field resolves, negate that effect, then send this card to the graveyard. So I have a love-hate with this card, mainly because I draw it all the time, and it just absolutely plagues my hand, but it is what it is. But it doesn't take away from the fact that this card can negate some of the most powerful cards in the game that can't be negated otherwise. Cards including like Super Poly, Dark Ruler No More, Forbidden Droplet, etc., etc. Why can it negate Super Poly? But it says, Winter, your opponent can't activate cards in response to that card's activation. Well, that's the thing. This card doesn't activate in response to the activation of Super Poly. It negates it when the card resolves, which is huge. So this can stop some of the most powerful cards in the game. So if I have to brick on it sometimes, it's no big deal. And plus that 800 attack boost can be the difference between winning and losing sometimes. So especially when you get your Megalo boosted up to 3200 attack and it's attacking twice, that's quite a bit of damage. So that's it for the main deck, 40 cards. The only way I really play Mermail is at 40 cards, 39 if you want to count the Upstart Goblin. So now we're going to go into the extra deck, and we'll start with the synchros. First and foremost, we have Ravenous Crocodragon Archethus. One of my favorite, absolutely favorite synchro monsters that this deck has gotten in recent times. It gives you a really, really good chance not only to draw more cards, but to be able to out cards that your in-engine cards might not be able to get rid of due to floodgates like Soul Drain and Abyss Dweller. And by the way, Abyss Dweller is this deck's worst enemy. But since this card isn't activating in the graveyard, you can pretty much use it to spot removal all sorts of cards on the opponent's side of the field, even on their turn. But it gains 500 attack and defense for each card in your hand. And then it says, if this card is Synchro Summon, you can draw cards equal to the number of non-tuners used for its Synchro Summon. So I've drawn anywhere from 1 to 3 cards off this card's effect. And with Megalanica, you can get to this card a lot easier. And then it says, quick effect, discard 2 cards, then target 1 card in the field as cost, so it can trigger Atlanteans, and then destroy it. So for example, if you had 2 copies of Atlantean Heavy Infantry in your hand and you discarded them off of this Ravenous Crocodragon, you'd be able to pop 3 cards. Yes, that's right, 3 cards. And then next up here, we have Adamancipator Risen Dragite as our only level 8 synchro. I've thought about playing 2 potentially because sometimes having a second one does come up. But this card is incredible, giving us access to spell and trap negation, stopping cards like Evenly Match, etc., etc. Says when your opponent activates a spell or trap card or effect, while a water monster is in your graveyard, quick effect, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. So this card is so crucial, especially for turning things off like Mystic Mine too, especially because it negates activations of cards. It's so amazing. Its first effect is really never going to come up, so I'm not even going to bother reading it. And you're always going to have a water monster too in your grave, so you'll pretty much never have to worry about it not being able to negate your spell or trap. Deep Sea Prima Donna. So this is that water synchro I was talking about earlier. And with the field spell, if you special summon a water synchro monster, you get to banish another card out of their hand during your main phase. But it says your opponent cannot target a synchro monster that used this card as material with monster effects, which is really good, especially since we're going to be using it to make Dragite quite a bit. Then it says you can target one of your opponent's banished cards as cost, add to your hand, or special summon 1 level 4 or lower water monster from your deck, and if you do, add that target to their hand. So you can special summon Deep Sea Artisan off this, or you can add Dragoons to your hand. You could special summon Prince off this. You could special summon Swap Frog, all while giving them just 1 card that is very low impact back to their hand, in order for you to be able to extend way further past than what you would normally be able to do. I think this card is so underrated. And not to mention that it's a tuner. So if you're not synchroing with it, you can link with it into Halqifibrax to chain block your Halqifibrax, and then per se, whatever card you banish off the field spell or off of Minstrel, you can put back into their deck with its other effect that says if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target 1 banished card as cost, shuffle it into the deck. So it can pretty much 100% get rid of cards that your opponent had in their hand instead of just sending them to the graveyard, which is one reason I'm not playing Moulin Glacia, the Elemental Lord, because that card right now I feel like is a little lackluster. I don't really feel too comfortable with sending cards from my opponent's hand to the graveyard. Sometimes I do miss it, but not all the time, not enough to put it back into the deck right now. And it does contribute to brick hands sometimes, but you're still able to do a good bit of hand looping with this Deep Sea engine, and has worked well for me so far. Then we have the Formula Synchron and Satellite Warrior. Formula Synchron, you're never really going to be making on your turn. This is a card that you're pretty much going to be summoning off of your Halqifibrax, get a draw to be able to fuel your Alacia or your Crocodragon. And then a lot of times I find myself using Formula to synchro with Dragite into Satellite Warrior, which sometimes can just be an absolute blowout against some decks, because if this card is Synchro Summon, you can target cards your opponent controls up to the number of Synchro monsters in their graveyard as cost and destroy them, and if you do, this card gains 1,000 attack for each card destroyed. So, before they leave main phase to go end phase, you can summon this, blow up all 3 back row, blow up 3 monsters mid-combo, whatever it may be, and then you got yourself a 5,500 monster that they might have a hard time dealing with, and then if this dies, you can reborn Formula Synchron from the graveyard just to block more damage with or to do whatever with. So have really enjoyed the whole Formula and Satellite Warrior package at this point. Then we have Mermail Abyss Gaios. Has pretty much been within the main deck since as long as I can remember. 2 level 7 water monsters to make. It's a very nice floodgatey card. Can control the pace of the game if you need it to. It says, while this face-up card has Ixie's material, level 5 or higher monsters cannot attack. And then once per turn, during either player's turn, you can detach 1 Ixie's material from this card and negate the effects of all face-up monsters your opponent currently controls. So you can basically just skill drain the opponent's entire field and prevent level 5 or higher monsters from attacking, including your own, which can suck sometimes, but Gaios can still get in since he's not a level, he is a rank. Then next up here, I'll throw up a quick translation of this card on the screen. This is number 37, Hope Woven Spider Shark, I believe. I think its effect is something along the lines of you can detach a material from this card. And again, it is sending water monsters to the grave as cost, potentially. So if you detach from this, much like if you detach from Abyss Dweller, you know, Ixie's monsters tend to detach for cost. So it will trigger something like the Atlantean Dragoons. But you can detach to decrease the attack of all monsters your opponent currently controls by 1,000 attack, I believe. And then if this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can target a water monster in your graveyard and summon it back to the field, which is so huge sometimes just for recursion and keeping up in the grind game. This is a flex spot for me. This could be whatever you want it to be. You could be Crystron Quandax, you could play another Link monster, another Synchro, whatever you want to do. This is just a card I wanted to put in here to be able to help push more damage sometimes. Then Abyss Dweller, hands down one of the best Ixie's monsters ever created. It's a little bit better in this deck because if it has a material attached to it that was originally water, all water monsters you control gain 500 attack, which is a huge bonus, especially when you have cards like Megalo getting to such high attack and attacking twice. You can see how easy the OTKs can become. And then being able to shut off the graveyard is huge and sometimes just an auto win against some decks. And then you have Bahamut Shark, which can tutor out any rank 3 or lower water monster from the extra deck, and the main one we go to do summon off of that effect is totally awesome. A beautiful Omni negate that when it hits the graveyard adds back a water monster to your hand, and can also potentially set the card that you negated if you destroyed it, which sometimes gives you a lot of leverage in a game. And then next up we have our Link monsters, 2 Marincess Coral Anemone. I still think to this day one of the most underrated Link monsters within the extra deck. Its effect basically states that you can target 1 water monster in your graveyard with 1500 or less defense, or attack, excuse me, and special summon it to your field to a zone that this card points to. And there's a lot of really good water monsters in this deck with 1500 or less attack. Infantry to grant you another normal summoner, per se Deep Sea Diva, Prince, Ravenous Crocodile, Archethys, and Deep Sea Prima Donna. This card can bring a wide range of cards out from the grave. It can even bring back Mistar Boy as well, which is pretty huge. Now, the one downside to that is it does lock you into waters only for the remainder of the turn, but that's not such a big deal, since I think the only non-water cards we're playing with in our main and extra deck are Satellite Warrior and Formula Synchron, but we're only ever going to be summoning those during our opponent's turn anyways, so that restriction really rarely comes up. And then our last few Link monsters here, we have Halqifibrax, of course, just to be able to continue to combo and tutor out monsters from our main deck, mainly cards like Fishborg Launcher. But you can tutor out things like Deep Sea Diva and Minstrel, and in combination with the field spell, make them level 4 to gain access to some rank 4s like Bahamut Shark or Abyss Dweller or Hope Woven Spider Shark. And then, of course, allows you to go for the Formula Satellite play during the opponent's turn. Then we have Abyss Alacia, one of the best Link monsters for this deck. Really good Mermail support. Anything it points to gains 500 attack and defense, which is nice, and it takes 2 fish, sea serpent, and or aqua monsters to make, so you can pretty much get to this card very easily. During your opponent's turn, quick effect, you can send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard as cost to add a Mermail monster from your deck to your hand. Finally, a way to search Teus. Too bad we can only do it during the opponent's turn. And then its other effect is really good too. It says if this card in its owner's possession is destroyed by an opponent's card or attack, you can send 1 water monster from your deck to the graveyard, then target 1 water monster in your graveyard as cost. So again, can trigger Atlanteans, special summon in defense position. So, your opponent really is going to do everything they can to not destroy this if they can. And if they do, you just get to plus off it big time. And then last but not least, the OG Mistar Boy. Main reason I'm playing Mistar Boy is sometimes you have no way to get to Alacia if Anemone is on the field because it is a Cyberse monster. So oftentimes I find myself using Mistar Boy, which is an Aqua monster, to bridge the gap between the Anemone and the Alacia. But also Mastar Boy is just a really good monster to be able to make. Sometimes you can put Alacia up here and then summon a Mastar Boy down here. And then soon, you can have any water monster that's right here being pointed to by Alacia being boosted by 1,000 attack, which is really nice. And of course, Mastar Boy can recycle resources from the grave too if it's destroyed by an opponent's card effect or by battle. So adding back those resources is nice. Now we'll go through the side deck really quickly. Just a generic side deck that I would use for this particular deck in this format. We have 3 Skullmeister, 3 DD Crow, 3 Cosmic Cyclone, 3 Forbidden Chalice, which I think is super, super important, especially since cards like, True King of All Calamities and Abyss Dweller will outright end your turn. Having something like Forbidden Chalice, ideally, this would be Forbidden Droplet, but Chalice will work just fine. So having that quick effect negation is very, very important. Double Lightning Storm and 1 red reboot, of course, for the control matchup. Now, I really only often find myself siding in about 6 or 7 cards against particular decks. The only cards I often find myself siding out would be Upstart, sometimes Terraforming, a Pot of Avarice, along with, let's see here, where is it? It's a copy of Swap Frog and a copy of Pike. I often find myself siding out. Or even 1 or 2 copies of Triple Tactics Talent. It really depends on the particular matchup, but those are sometimes the cards that I'll find myself siding out. And again, if you want more in-depth, play of this deck and how this particular strategy works for my particular build, check out the testing sessions video I posted, as well as some of the Dueling Book rated content I posted with Mermail in the recent weeks. I'll leave an annotation again up in the top right or in the description of the video and check those out. So that's it for the deck profile. Now we're going to go ahead and go into the next segment of this video. Alright, so for this portion of the video, I'm going to be showing you guys a few mainstay combos, if you will, of not only my particular build of Mermail, but of just sort of standard Mermail builds in general. And then we're going to take it over to Dueling Book, where I'll show you guys a game or two, just so you can get a feel for how the deck would operate in a, real-life situation against a random opponent. And again, as I said earlier in the deck profile segment, I have plenty of videos on my channel that showcase me just playing the deck randomly in real matches, real games online on Dueling Book. So I'll leave links to those videos down in the description, as well as, of course, they'll be annotated up in the top right of the video too, if you click on that little eye. So these replays here, these combos, I got 4 of them. I could showcase some other niche things, but I just wanted to showcase the main bulk of Mermail combos. And a lot of those combos will stem from having a combination of Mermail Abyss Teus and Atlantean Dragoons in your hand. Teus and Dragoons. It's like the center of pretty much all combos. I don't even want to think about how many possible combos can stem out from those 2 cards, because it's got to be quite a lot. But I picked out 2 of my personal favorites, and 2 that I think that are actually really, really solid combos in general, and there's sort of 2 different variants of them. And I also have picked out 2 combos as well that showcase really cool plays and really good boards that you can make through the Deep Sea engine that I am currently playing. So I figured it'd be important to show you guys some combos that are relative to the deck profile you just saw, as well as just, in Mermail Atlantean in general. So we'll go ahead and take a look at this first one here. And as you can see, all this is going to take is Deep Sea Diva and Moulin Glacia. This combo could also be done, I imagine, if you open up the Deep Sea Minstrel alongside Atlantean Dragoons, because you'll just take a look at the hand, and then you'll add Deep Sea Diva all the same and start the combo like you're going to see it right now. So we're going to go ahead and normal summon Deep Sea Diva. That's going to summon Prince. Prince is going to send Dragoons here and add Dragoons and a copy of Minstrel. And then from there, you might be able to guess, we're going to go ahead and pitch Minstrel alongside Dragoons, take their best card out of their hand. Here, it's important to rip something out like a Nibiru or some hand trap that might end up hurting you down the road. Particularly like Skullmeister. Again, they could have potentially already used it, but maybe they're saving it for something else. Whatever it may be, some problematic hand trap that they haven't used yet, or maybe if there are no hand traps, taking the best card out of their hand. If it's like Invoked, right, and they have a copy of Alistair in the hand, rip that out of the hand, take their best card, because you will be able to put that card back into their deck later on in the combo. So once we pitch Minstrel, resolve Minstrel, we banish the card out of their hand until the end phase, face up. We're going to resolve Dragoons, and Dragoons is going to add us Lapis Dragon here. And once we add Lapis Dragon, that'll proc its effect to special summon itself. Now, the order here doesn't really matter. You can link off the Lapis and the Diva for Anemone, then play the field spell. I play the field spell first here and stack, importantly, Neptibus to the top of the deck. And then, or we keep Lapis on the field, rather, my bad, because we'll need it later to link off into Halqifibrax. But we're going to stack Neptibus to the top, because we're going to use Anemone to bring back Deep Sea Minstrel, which gets an effect on summon to mill the top 3 cards of the deck, and then we return a level 4 lower water back to the deck as a result. We mill 3, of course. Prince is one of the cards that we milled, and the other 2 cards in this instance happen to be blanks, but you can imagine they could be other helpful cards like Swap Frog and Ronin Totem, or maybe an infantry or something, whatever it may be, or Fishborg Launcher, again, whatever it may be. But Prince will activate, we'll put a card back, and Prince is going to summon Dragoons, and that will allow us to synchro into the Deep Sea Prima Donna, and that will proc the field spell, allow us to banish another card out of their hand face up, which gives us room to breathe in terms of being able to activate Prima Donna's effect, right? Because we don't want to give them their best card back. So we hit another card out of their hand, right? Maybe it's just, you know, whatever, maybe it's Cosmic Cyclone or something, right? You just hit that out of their hand, so we can use Prima Donna's other effect, which allows us to target a banished card that they control, and then we get to add or special summon a level 4 lower water from our deck, and then if we do, they get that card back. So we're going to give them back their, you know, the blank card, the card that really doesn't matter. So in this case here, we just put the field spell back, and here we're going to summon Deep Sea Artisan from the deck. That's going to mill a card off the top to summon a level 4 lower water from the grave, and it gets its effects negated, which is no big deal. We're going to always summon Dragoons here, and for good reason. You'll see in just a moment. Then we're going to synchro the Artisan and the Prima Donna for Dragite. That's going to proc the graveyard effect to Prima Donna to shuffle back a banished card, and lo and behold, it's their best card. And then we're going to link Anemone and Lapis Dragon into Halqifibrax. Halqifibrax is going to summon Minstrel here. You could summon Diva too if you don't have a Minstrel in deck. And the main reason we're doing this is we're going to use the field spell to make it a level 4 to overlay with Atlantean Dragoons for either Abyss Dweller, Hope Woven Spider Shark if you want to do that as well, or in this case, it is going to be Bahamut Shark, which you'll see here in just a second. Modify its level to level 4, and if it's Diva, again, you just increase its level by 2 because the field spell can increase by 1 or 2, and then we add a Diva for next turn. You could add an infantry, right? Maybe your Artisan or your Minstrel milled a Lapis Dragon, or not a Lapis Dragon, rather, but a Fishborg Launcher, per se, already at this point. Or maybe you milled Ronin and Swap, because, again, we've milled 4 cards off the top already. And here, you know, you could add infantry and summon the Fishborg Launcher and link the Fishborg Launcher and the Bahamut Shark for Alacia. And then you get yourself an additional interruption. And still, don't forget here, we can tag out the Halqifibrax for either Desert Locust, take another card out of their hand. You could tag out, in this case, for Formula, draw a card, and then synchro in with a Dragite and the Formula for Satellite Warrior and blow up to 3 cards. In this case, we would be able to blow up 3 because we have the Prima Donna in the grave. And this also cannot be targeted by monster effects either, which is really, really nice. So that's it for that first replay here. We're going to go ahead and show this replay again, but with a little bit of extra firepower with it, if you will. So again, like I said, same combo here, but we're just going to add Abyss Teus into the equation here, and you'll see things get a little spicy. So we're going to do Diva into Prince. We're going to send Dragoons, add Dragoons, and Minstrel. I'm so used to saying add Dragoons, or send Dragoons, add Dragoons, Megalo. But we're going to send Dragoons to add Dragoons Minstrel, pitch Dragoons Minstrel, hit a card out of their hand, and then we're going to add, this time, not Lapis Dragon, but add Prince off of that Dragoon search, and we're going to summon Teus by discarding Prince, and Teus Chainlink 2, Prince Chainlink 1 to special summon back Dragoons. We're going to importantly add Gun here. You got to add Gun for this, and then we're going to link into the Anemone, leaving the Dragoons and the Prince on the field. We got to leave this on the field because we're not going to stack Prince this time with the Minstrel because we've already resolved Prince's graveyard effect. So we want to get that Dragoons on field beforehand so we can synchro into Prima Donna. Play the field spell. We're going to stack Dragoons to the top this time, and then we're going to go ahead and summon the Deep Sea Minstrel, mill 3. And here we mill really good. We mill Swap Frog, Ronin, and Atlantean Dragoons, but again, all that matters is that we mill Atlantean Dragoons. The other 2 cards that we mill literally do not matter. In fact, I put Ronin Totem back just to show that it does not matter. So we're going to use Dragoons here. That's going to search Lapis Dragon now a little later on. we're going to synchro for Prima Donna. We're going to take another card out of their hand, and this is just going to provide food, essentially, for Prima Donna. It's going to summon out Swap Frog from the deck. Swap Frog is going to trigger, sending another swap. And then we're going to summon Swap again by discarding that gun that we conveniently added earlier on. We're going to be able to take advantage of that effect here, chain block our Swap Frog, and get Teus onto the field. And we're going to send Ronan now. So again, it literally doesn't matter. We literally get to resolve Swap twice here and also resolve gun. So it doesn't matter what we milled off that Minstrel. We're going to go ahead into Dragite now. Again, putting that best card that they had back. And we're going to go ahead and use the level manipulation effect of the field spell here to make Lapis Dragon a level 7. So we can go ahead and overlay into Abyss Gaios, use Ronan, banish Swap, and go into Totally Awesome here. And that is that combo. So we end on Dragite, Toad, and Gaios this time around just by adding in Teus to that combo. So that's it for the 2 Deep Sea combos I want to show you now. All right, so this next replay, again, is just a standard Teus and Dragoons anti-Nibiru combo. And I bring up anti-Nibiru specifically because Nibiru is one of the hand traps, apart from Droll Bird, that really hurts this deck. Nibiru and Droll really slow this deck down. Word of caution, if you can play around those cards, I highly recommend you do it because you'll have very slow turns under those cards. So specifically, Teus Dragoons, anti-Nibiru. Now, I will say and preface this replay by saying that these 2 cards have led to probably infinite amount of combos. There's so many combos that can stem from these 2 cards here, spanning multiple formats. Whether you go back to Firewall Dragon, these 2 cards ended in a full extra link. You go to Orcus format with Nightmare Mermaid. This ended in full Orcus combo. Yes, I know. Pretty crazy. And even now with Helka Fibrax and the Despot and Coltwing stuff with Auroradon, still full combo there with just these 2 cards. It's pretty crazy. But this is more of a like tried and true, like traditional, just plain old Mermail anti-Nibiru combo you can do with just Teus and Dragoons without having to add a lot of interesting bricks and stuff to the main deck. Yes, they can pull some spicy combos off, but they can, of course, lower the consistency of the deck. But either way, Teus is going to resolve adding Pike, and Dragoons is going to add Prince. And we're actually going to normal summon the Pike here, and you'll see why in just a moment. You might be thinking, if you don't already know where this is going, you might be thinking, well, that's kind of a waste of a Prince. Why not just normal summon the Prince? You'll see in just a moment. So normal summoning the Pike, pitching the Prince, Pike adds Gun, and then Prince is going to revive Dragoons from the grave. This is our 3rd summon. 4th summon is Bahamut Shark. We're detaching Dragoons here to summon Toad as our 5th summon. So if they try to hit us with a rock right now, we can say no instantly. Dragoons is going to add Lapis Dragon here, and we're going to link into Anemone. And Anemone is going to revive 1 water monster in our graveyard with 1500 or less attack, and Prince fits the bill. So now, this late into the combo, we're going to resolve Prince. We're going to send Dragoons. We're going to add Dragoons, and I believe we add Megalo here as well. Yep, so we're going to add Megalo, pitching the Gund and the Dragoons. We're going to resolve all these effects, of course, resolving the Megalo to add Abyssgale to Mizuchi, revive Pike here, and add Heavy Infantry. You could revive the Teus here if you wanted to, but I find that, adding the Pike here results in kind of a cool little play too. We're going to go for the Crystron Helka Fibrax now, summon out Fishborg Launcher, go for the Adamancipator Risen Dragite, and now we're going to link for Alacia and equip it with Mizuchi. So just like that, pretty solid board. It's a 3 interruption board, technically 4 interruption rather, if you want to count the formula play with Satellite Warrior. Because, you can pitch the infantry here that we strategically added so that when we use Alacia during the opponent's turn to search a Mermail, whether it be Teus, right, or whatever it may be, if you're playing other Mermails, right, you can still, after you search, use infantry to destroy a face-up card they control, which is really strong. And again, this will get you a card back in the process too, which is really nice. So that's a solid variation there. Nice little anti-Nibiru combo. Now, this is that same combo, but this is if you were playing Mooling Glaciers. You saw my deck profile. I wasn't playing Mooling Glacier. I don't think the card's terrible, but if you want to play it, you can play it, and it will result in a combo similar to this. Teus Dragoons, it's pretty much going to play out exactly the same up until a certain point here when we add a specific card from our deck to our hand. So Prince revives the Dragoons. We go for Bahamut Shark, detach Dragoons, summon Toad, and Dragoons is going to search Mooling Glacier here, because when we link off the Bahamut and the Teus, we have exactly 5 waters in our grave. And so what we want to do now is special summon the Moulin, rip 2 random cards from their hand, and now we're going to use Anemone just the same, send Dragoons to add Dragoons, and then we're going to add the Megalo here, and then we're going to summon Megalo, pitching the Gund and the Dragoons. We can use Gund here to chain block the Megalo so we can get a guaranteed search of Mizuchi, and then we're going to add Infantry here, and then we're going to overlay into Bisgaios, rather, my bad. And then we're going to link, unfortunately, we do have to link the Moulin Glacier here with the Prince. There might be other ways to get around this, but for those that don't know, when Moulin Glacier leaves the field, you lose the battle phase of your next turn. So it will slow you down a little bit next turn, but you do get to end on Alacia on top of that. So you do have the Spell and Trap negation from Mizuchi, or just the Spell negation, rather, my bad. You do have the interruption in the form of infantry through Alacia, the Omni negate of Totally Awesome, and a monster negate here. So if you, per se, don't really need a Spell and Trap negate in the form of Dragout, you can go this route, of course, if you're playing Moulin Glacier as well. You keep in mind, they are down 2 cards, so you can technically interrupt 4 of them, right? You can negate a spell, pop 1, negate 1, and negate another on the field. So potentially you have an answer to all of the remaining cards, but then again, if Moulin Glacier puts some really strong cards in the graveyard, you kind of did yourself in a little bit, and you're out of battle phase next turn. So I tend to like the other version a little bit better. I tend to like my Deep Sea variants a little bit better, but then again, these are just some good combos that I wanted to show you guys. There are so many combos that you can do with Mermails. If you guys have any combos of your own that you want to share, leave them down in the comment section below. But yeah, now we're going to head over to Dueling Book, and I'll just show you guys just a random replay, a random game, you know, in a natural sort of real life environment. All right, so here I have picked out just a random game that I want to show you guys. They actually ended up quitting out after game 1, so I don't have a full match to show you, but I don't really think I need to show you guys a full match. There are some cool things here with this particular replay, you know, and how like the deck can sort of like handle in different situations. And things you can do if you don't have the optimal setup, right? I like showing combos sometimes, but I think it's just more valuable if you just show how to play out random hand after random hand, because it's not a perfect world and you're not always going to see the 2-card combo. And sometimes there's going to be an interruption to stop it that's going to force you to go down sort of like a different play line, if you will. So here we open Lapis Dragon, which is unfortunate. We do have 1-for-1, which is really good. We do also see the field spell. So basically what you're going to see me do here is start with the 1-for-1. That's going to go for Prince. We're going to ditch the Lapis Dragon. We're going to send Dragoons at Dragoon's Minstrel, all the same. We're going to use Minstrel, hit that Grenmaju out of his hand, and we're going to search off Dragoons. And we're going to search Megalo here. And I search Megalo mainly because I want a way to be able to proc the Dragoons in my hand, but also get an additional body on my field. Yes, I could have grabbed Diva, but Diva doesn't do me too much to proc the Dragoons in my hand, and it only gets me like an infantry or marksman on my field, which really doesn't do me anything. And I decided just to normal the swap here. That way I can get a little bit ahead on sort of like my Swap Frog activations. So I just go ahead and get Ronin Totem out of the deck here, I believe. And then I just bounce it back to my hand before summoning this Megalo, searching Mizuchi. And I would have searched Lapis Dragon here if it was in the deck. So Lapis Dragon not being in the deck here actually did kind of hurt, because I'm a little short on bodies on field to be able to pull off the full optimum combo where we're able to go into Bahamut Shark, Dragite, all this cool stuff, etc., etc. So we're a little short on that end, but we do have the Frog Engine working in our favor here, not only to, you know, access Totally Awesome, but to be able to get, you know, a little free water monster out of the graveyard every now and then when we need it. So we're going to go ahead and play Megalanica now, and this is going to stack Prince to the top of the deck like we usually do. Banish swap for Ronin, go for an enemy, do all that stuff, you know, recycle the Dragoons, go for Prince to bring back Dragoons, summon Prima Donna, banish Desires out of his hand, put it back to his hand, and here we're going to summon Swap Frog from the deck instead of going for Artisan, because going for Artisan right now doesn't really make sense. So if I go for Artisan and, you know, bring back Dragoons, I can't get access to Dragite. I mean, well, I can, but I'm going to be missing out on Halka Fibrax, because I'll have to Synchro, the Artisan, and the Prima Donna for Dragite, thus leaving me with just a Dragoons on the field and no way to get to Halqifibrax, ending on just Dragite and a Dragoons with a Megalo. You know, of course, I could link for a Lacey, equip with Mizuchi, and have the infantry, but that leaves me with a little, like, worse off of a field. So instead, I just go with the safe route, summon out Swap. I know I've already got Ronin and Grave, so I'm just going to summon out Swap, send another Swap, and then link the Prima Donna and the Anemone for Hulk, since, you know, Prima Donna is a tuner. That allow me to chain block my Hulk too, even though I know he has no interruptions. And it, of course, allow me to shuffle back his Grenmaju back into his deck. Now, at this particular point, we're going to summon out Fishborg Launcher and banish Swap for Ronin. Go into the, let me pause this here, go into Toad and go into Dragite with the Fishborg Launcher and the Megalo. Now, unfortunately, because the way that turn played out, and we didn't have, like, access to Lapis Dragon, I wasn't able to make Bahamut Shark. And now, if we had Bahamut Shark with, like, the field that we had and the extra Toads and stuff, and extra, you know, Swap Frogs and all that stuff, we could potentially link the Bahamut Shark and, like, a Ronin Toad and a Fishborg Launcher into Alacia, and then equipped it with the Abyss Scale to be able to potentially negate this Desires that we know he has. He also draws another evenly matched return, which is pretty, almost pretty bad for us, but of course we have Dragite and we have Toad still to be able to stop them. And then, of course, we have another sort of secret interruption that our opponent doesn't see yet in the form of Satellite Warrior. But you can see how not having access to that extra body made our field slightly weaker. But again, you know, we could have potentially made an Alacy here as well. So I'm just going to let this play out. We negate one evenly, negate the other with Toad, set this to our field, you know, to kind of leverage it against him later on. There goes the Pot of Desires. He doesn't draw too well. He draws Gren and another trap. He sets 3. And here I, you know, go for formula on the resolution of the Desires, so it doesn't miss timing, making sure it's the last thing to activate. So I get that draw of Minstrel, slowly building the card advantage. You know, Swap adds back a Taya. Suddenly, we're going from 2 cards to 4 cards before our next turn has even started. And we're just going to continue here, synchroning the Satellite Warrior. Popping 3 goes up to 5,500. And before Tejas can hit the field, he goes ahead and scoops it up there, and he actually ends up quitting as well. But yeah, that's just a basic rundown of how I would have played out that random hand against a random deck such as Grenmaju. So yeah, that is pretty much going to do it for this segment of the video regarding combos and replays. If you guys have any more questions, again, let me know down in the comments. And if you want to see more gameplay of Mermail, again, don't forget to check out those videos that I've already talked about. Link to them in the description below. Alright, so for this part of the video, I have a lot of cards here picked out on EDO Pro, and all of these cards are just other techs / engines that you could run in a typical Mermail Atlantean deck, you know, consisting of what the basic core is. A lot of these you could add in or not run. I'll give pros and cons, etc., etc. In here you might see some cards that I'm also running myself, mainly the Swap Frog engine. We'll get to that in a moment, but the first one I want to talk about is the infamous Gen X Undyne package paired with that of Gen X Controller. And I guess if we're talking about the Undyne engine, we might as well also talk about Crystron Rosenix as well. So for those that don't know, Gen X Undyne says when this card is normal summoned, you can send 1 water monster from your deck to the graveyard as cost. So this will trigger Atlanteans to add 1 Gen X controller from your deck to your hand. Now, a little funny thing about this card, I don't know how many times people have ashed this card. People have Veilered this card, impermed it, whatever. And they really make the card better when they do that, because the only thing they're stopping you from doing is from adding this Garnet to your hand. Because the best part about Undyne is the fact that it sends a water monster from the deck to the graveyard, i.e. Dragoons or Prince or Infantry, whatever it may be. And you have to add this as sort of doing that, as this is what you have to get in return as Gen X controller. Some builds back in the day used to play Allure of Darkness in the main deck, or this particular Garnet. So if you happen to draw the 2 together, you could at least draw some more cards, dig a little bit deeper into your deck, but that's a little bit more of like an older school tech. I wouldn't really recommend doing it now. Some people also used to play Daigusta Emerald to be able to put the controller back into the deck if the if it ever ended up in the grave or whatever, because a lot of people would actually use this card to synchro up into other monsters like Bryanek or whatever it may be. So but what's more common now with Gen X Undyne is sending Crystron Rosnix, and you can already see why I personally don't like it. Yes, it's a solid normal summon. Yes, it's searchable off of Pike, but you are required, if you want full value from it, to play these two Garnets, if you will. I wouldn't call Rosnix a hard brick because it is a water and can be discarded off any of your other Mermails and generate you a token. But it's not an optimal card to draw. It's most optimal when it's left in the deck to be sent off of Undyne. So the combo is you send this off of Undyne, add controller to the hand, banish Rosnix, summon a token, link the token to Link Spider. Link Spider summons Gen X controller from the hand, and boom, just like that, you have yourself a 1-card Halqifibrax to start doing plays. Now, if you want to play Halqifibrax Turbo, I would recommend doing that because it's a pretty clean and efficient way to get to it. The Rosnix is pretty much always going to hit the grave no matter what, because if they Valor, Ash, Imperm, whatever it may be, you're still sending Rosnix's cost. You're just not getting the controller, which I guess in that instance, if you're trying to play Turbo Halq, it's kind of bad because you won't have that free tuner in your hand, but you can see how it's just a 1-card, Link 2 or Link 3 setup potentially, or Halq setup, sort of Halq Turbo. But I really wish I could play my Undynes. I have DTs and DT controller. I just don't think it's that good right now, especially with Diva being at 3. I just really don't see a reason to play this card outside of if you really want to Halq Turbo. This is a bit safer way to do it, because Diva sometimes is a bit more susceptible to hand traps than that of Undyne, but Undyne nonetheless still a solid engine. I just don't think it's where it's at right now. And another thing to note, if you were to play Undyne, I would recommend playing Sekka's Light with it, and we'll talk more about that when we get there. So next we have the Frog engine. We have Swap Frog, we have Ronin Toad, we have Dupe Frog as well. And I'm not personally playing Dupe Frog, but it is something you can run if you want to play more of a control type variant of the deck, because obviously you have Dupe Frogs on field effect. It says that your opponent can only target monsters for attacks that are Dupe Frog, or cannot target other monsters for attacks except for Dupe Frog. I don't feel like that effect's that worth going for, because obviously once you get your Toad established, you can use its effect in the standby phase to summon out Dupe, and then they can't battle phase shenanigans your Toad or whatever it may be. Which I guess could be advantageous in some situations where Lightning Storm is a potential threat. You could actually leave your Toad in defense with that 0 defense and feel safe, because if they do go to the battle phase, they have to attack Dupe Frog, and it at least has 2,000 defense. But I really don't like the Dupe Frog. I'm not a fan of it. It's pretty much going to miss timing a lot. When it's sent from the field to the grave, you can add a Frog monster deck to hand, like deck or graveyard your hand, like that's okay, but this card is very susceptible to missing timing. Like if you blink or sneeze, this card will miss timing. But Swap Frog and Ronin Toad, like you have to play Ronin Toad if you're going to play Swap. Triple Swap's obviously the way to go. I like this card because in a worst case scenario, if you happen to draw this card with any other suboptimal water, like it'll turn into Totally Awesome, which is an Omni Negate that'll recycle a card in the process. So it's not that bad. And it can also provide some discard outlets for things like Gund, or just setting up your graveyard for Gund, or whatever it may be. Just setting up your graveyard any way, shape, or form. Or just getting extra extenders, because sometimes you might not even have, right? You might not even have a full Totally Awesome setup, but you can use Ronin to constantly keep bringing himself out to make more Link plays, or you can use Swap for Synchro plays, and being a level 2 actually sometimes is pretty advantageous, whether you're synchroning for a Prima Donna, or you're synchroning for a Crocosaur or a Crocodragon with a lot of non-tuner materials to be able to draw a lot of cards. So I find personally the Swap engine to be a little bit better than the Gen X engine, as far as like, sort of 4-card water supporting engines are concerned. I find the Swap Frog engine to be a little bit better. Yes, I wish it could trigger Atlantean Dragoons. That's not the case. It is what it is. But it can still give you extenders, discard outlets, and also provide you with the possible Omni Negate of Totally Awesome, which is one of the best Xyz monsters, water Xyz monsters, in my opinion, ever to be printed. So I would definitely have to put the Swap Frog engine above that of the Gen X engine, but they both have their pros and cons. Of course, drawing Ronin Toadin is not good, but anytime you draw these two cards together, you draw 2 Swap, you just get a free Toad, and it's going to protect one of your vulnerable normal summons, either Diva or Prince, and that's, again, why I really like this engine. Now we're going to go over here and talk about the level 4s, because this deck has an affinity for making water rank 4s. There's a lot of really good ones we can make. Abyss Dweller and Bahamut Shark, just to name a few. And of course, if we get Bahamut Shark, we get Totally Awesome, which means we have protected plays. Tenyi Spirit Shatana, just if you control no effect monsters, special summon it from your hand, free level 4 body. Same thing with White Stingray. This card I like a little bit better because it can provide you with a discard outlet. Will not trigger Atlanteans because you can special summon this card from your hand by discarding 1 water monster. That's 1 whole effect. You're not discarding the water monster as cost. It's as part of the effect, so it will not trigger Atlanteans. But you can still trigger Gun because it does discard. And then you have Aqua Spirit. Aqua Spirit is one that I like the most. Because White Stingray says you can only summon it that way once per turn, and Tenyi Spirit Shathana says you can only use each effect of Tenyi Spirit Shathana once per turn, and of course you have to control no effect monsters. So drawing this late game is not that great. If you have multiple Stingrays, it's not that good, but Aqua Spirit I think is the best one because you can summon multiples, and you can also control your graveyard as well in terms of like how many waters you have in your grave to help set up Moulin Glacia and things like that. And it's got pretty decent stats. It's, you know, standby phase effect to, you know, turn one of your opponent's monsters to defense position. And they can't change that position for the rest of the turn. It's actually, like, pretty nice in some instances and in, like, some grind situations. But I think Aqua Spirit is just the best. Yes, all these cards suck to draw at the right instance. If you don't have a good discard in hand, Stingray's kind of meh. If you don't have any waters in your grave, Aqua Spirit's meh. If you draw this, you know, later on, it's kind of eh. You know, they all have their pros and cons for sure. White Stingray, although I will say I do like a good amount strictly because it can make Deep Sea Aria alive. It's just another discard outlet. We'll talk about Deep Sea Aria in a moment. So some good level 4 bodies. Then we have the Mermail cards. There's quite a few other Mermail cards that I think are somewhat viable. But not always. You have Mermail Abyss Lead, discard 3 other waters, so that's a huge investment. Obviously can lead to some very, very explosive plays. If you happen to draw this with triple Dragoons, you know, you just go plus a billion. It says target Abyss Spell or trap in your graveyard as cost, add it to your hand so you can recycle Mizuchi or Abyss Feeder. But then it also has a really interesting factor where it says you contribute 1 other attack position Mermail monster as cost. Send 1 random card from your opponent's hand to the graveyard. So it can kind of hand loop on its own, which is pretty cool. The only time I see this card played is when people are really trying to emphasis on hand looping, because you can go Moulin Glacia, rip 2, Deep Sea Minstrel, rip 1, and if you find a way to make it all work with the Megalanica, the field spell and all that, and shuffle that card back, you can take 3. Lead could potentially take 4. But the way Lead will have to work is you'll have to get them back from the grave off of Gund, because you really cannot afford to summon this card via its own effect, just because you're going to go so minus on the play unless you're discarding triple Dragoons. It's just not worth it. But it does have its, like, you know, niche little place that it can be in if you really want to run it. Now we have Turge. Turge is like the counterpart to Abyss Pike, the other level 4. It says when this card is normal or special summon, you can discard a water monster to the graveyard, and then target level 3 or lower water monster in your graveyard as cost. Add that target to your hand. So there are some cool plays you can do. There's the whole Pike Turge loop, where you can go Pike, pitch Gund, and then search, and then Gund revives Turge, and then Turge pitch a card. Turge adds back the Gund. So you can just loop the Gund like that, get it to the grave, get it back to your hand, and get 2 level 4s on field. That sounds really good on paper, but good luck pulling that off in an actual game. I really do like Turge. I also wish this card would come in a higher rarity than just rare. Maybe that'll happen someday. But Turge is cool. I just don't think he's where it's at right now. Maybe if the format slows down even more, maybe there'll be a place for it. Then we have Mermail Abyssmander. This one has probably seen the most play out of all the other Mermail cards that I'll show you guys. It says you can banish this card from your graveyard to activate one of these effects. Increase the levels of all Mermail monsters you can currently control by 1 or by 2. Why is that relevant? Well, because we can make our level 7 Mermails rank or level 9, and that is pretty cool because we can access True King of all calamities. If you really want to play True King Turbo, Abyssmander is the way to go. Yes, there are other ways to access. You can make the Synchro Trish or Crocodragon and then make the Fusion Trish and go for it that way. Or you could just, you know, summon Teus, search this, and then get it to the grave via Megalo or Minstrel, and then get another level 7 on board. However you do that, and use this graveyard effect. That's the way I'm most familiar with doing it. I don't know the combos with Crocodragon and Fusion Trish. I think they involve the Halcyon Deskbot plays. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's how it's done. If you know the exact combo, go ahead and post it down in the comments. But Mander, the traditional way, you know, Teus Dragoons, Teus Pitch Goons, add Mander, add Diva, summon Prince, send Dragoons, add Dragoons, Megalo, Pitch, Gund, or Mander and Dragoons. You know, do all your searching, and then banish, make them level 9, overlay, etc., etc. There you go. You have a true king of all calamities. Next up, we have Hild, and I'll put Hild and Dine next to each other. Hild says, if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can special summon a Mermail monster from your hand, except itself. So if you're playing more Mermail heavy build, this card will fit in, because you can just, you know, summon, like, per se, for example, like a lead out of your hand, or a pike, etc., etc. You just gotta be careful that those cards don't miss timing, because this is a when, pike is a when, etc., etc. Dine is another really, really cool card. One of my favorites next to Abyss Osea, and we'll talk about Osea in a minute. But Abyss Dine says, when this card is added from your deck to your hand by a card effect, you can special summon this card from your hand. You must control a Mermail monster to activate and resolve this effect. And it says, when this card is special summoned by the effect of a Mermail monster, you can target one level 3 or lower Mermail monster in your graveyard as cost, special summon that target. You can only use one Mermail Abyss Dine effect per turn, and only once that turn. So this card, there's a lot of cool things you can do with it. When you add it, you can summon it, and then if it's in the grave and you revive it off of Gund, you can just use it to bring back Gund. Or Lind, or Abyss Array, or Osea, whatever it may be, or Hild. You can just use it to revive another monster out of grave and kind of extend. It's kind of like the Mermail equivalent, if you will, of Deep Sea Artisan. And then really the only way you're going to revive this is if it's special summoned by the effect of a Mermail monster. Like, literally the only card that can do that is that of Gund. I think Osea might be able to do it as well. But I find it more efficient to do it off of Gund. Abyss Lind, this is one of the OG Mermails. This card used to be played at 3 back in the day with Abyss Sphere, because what you would do is you would, during your opponent's end phase, activate Abyss Sphere, summon Lind from the deck, and then this would die in that end phase, or you do it in their main phase too, whatever. And then this card would die, and then it would take with it the monster that it summoned, and when Lind is destroyed, when this card in the field is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon a Mermail monster from your deck, and then you would summon a Pike, pitch like an infantry, pop a card they have on their field, or pitch a marksman, pop a card they just set, get a search of Undying off of the Pike, and go off from there. So there were some cool things you could do with Lind, but it's a little too slow right now. If you still want to tech the one Lind and Sphere because you have alties, and, you know, you want to go for it off of Megalo, right? You can still do that to help accelerate the game, maybe close the game out a little faster. That's something you could definitely do, but I just don't think it's worth the main deck space for me personally right now. Next, we have Mermail Abyss Array. This one is pretty interesting. It says, quick effect, you can discard this card, then target one water monster you control as cost. Destroy one other water monster in your hand or field. If you do, the targeted monster gains attack and defense equal to the destroyed monster's original attack and defense until the end of this turn. So you can discard it, pop a card, and then make something gain attack. So you can use this during the battle phase to, like, it's kind of like an Honest, but for water monsters, but with a lot more steps. And then it says, if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can draw one card, then discard one card. So unfortunately, that effect does not trigger Atlanteans, which is unfortunate, but it could trigger something like Hild, I guess, or it could trigger something like Gund, because it does say discard. So this card has its place in some builds, but I just don't think it's that great. Then we have Abyss Osea. This card is really, really cool. This card is really, really cool when paired with Aqua Spirit in the main deck and Abyss Mander, and I'll tell you why. So basically, this card says you can target one Mermail monster you control, special summon any number of level 4 or lower Mermail monsters from your deck whose combined levels are less than or equal to the level of that monster, then send that monster to the graveyard. So you summon, then you send. Keep that in mind. So if your field is clogged, you can't use Osea because it doesn't send, then summon. It summons, then sends. I know it's a little weird, right? But it says, you know, you can summon any number of level 4 or lower Mermail monsters from the deck. So a cool thing you can do is you go Teus, right? Pitch any water search Osea, normal Osea, send or summon out Mander and summon out like Gund from the deck, right? And then the Teus will leave the field. You can like summon like an Aqua Spirit from your hand or something, and then link like the Mander and the Aqua Spirit off, and then you can just go into like a rank 2. And then or a link 2 rather, and then you can use Mander in the grave to boost the level 3s you had to level 4. There's some cool things you could do there. Or you could, you know, overlay the Mander and the Aqua Spirit for like Bahamut Shark, detach Mander, you know, and then summon Toad, and then use Mander in grave to get another rank 4. So there's some really cool things you can do, but again, it does require a lot of pieces and parts to be able to pull it off. It's not going to be that consistent, but it's still a cool card nonetheless. I think as far as like the other Mermails are concerned, I think Osea, Mander, and probably Dine are like the 3 other best Mermails that you could play if you wanted to consider playing other Mermails. Those are the 3 I would look to. Then next we have Moulin Glacier, the Elemental Lord, a staple of Mermail, if you will. I personally am not playing it right now because it sometimes will take up the slot of an extender that you could search that would make for a better play. Sometimes when you go for this card, you have to really build your entire turn around it. You have to make sure you have the graveyard set up. You have to make sure you're searching it at the right time. And in some cases, if you can't protect it or you have to link it off, you kind of do yourself a disservice by losing your battle phase of next turn. And as a deck that likes to OTK, it's very counterproductive. And sometimes the format is so like anti-discard. Let's say, for example, like danger formats, right? You really wouldn't want to go around blind Moulin Glacier'ing people because you might just make them go super plus in the process. I find that this is kind of one of those formats against Drytron and Eldritch specifically. Discarding 2 cards out of their hand might actually do more harm than good for you. But this card, nonetheless, still a powerhouse. If you have 5 water monsters in your graveyard exactly, you can special summon this, then discard 2 random cards from the opponent's hand or their entire hand if less than 2. Then next we have Dragon Ice. I haven't seen this card in so long. This card I really wouldn't recommend playing, but if you are looking for some spice, maybe this is it. It says when your opponent special summons a monster except during the damage step, you can discard 1 card as cost, special summon this card from your hand or graveyard. So let's say your opponent special summons Ecclesia, right? You can chain Dragon Ice, pitch infantry, summon it, and then pop the Ecclesia during their turn, or even if this card's in the graveyard. It's a cool little thing. The only problem is this card isn't searchable. This used to be played way back in the day. Yeah, it's a little cool thing that you can do. Instant Fusion is in here because you can summon out the rare fish, and especially if you're playing Cross Sheep, easy way to set up Bahamut Shark plays because you could use Cross Sheep to bring back Dragoons in the graveyard, and just like that, you have yourself a nice little Bahamut Shark play. So that is pretty cool for that. Or you can play Sea Monster of Theseus, etc., etc. Moray of Greed, one of the other better draw spells for the deck, because why? We play a lot of water monsters, so we can potentially fix bad hands, make them better. The only problem is this card sometimes will put you in a situation where, let's say you have Teus Dragoons in your hand. Those are the only waters, and you have Moray of Greed. Are you going to sacrifice one of your best possible openings to maybe draw Teus Dragoons plus something else? No. So this Moray of Greed is going to sit dead in your hand and just literally grin at you like that in the picture, and will just laugh at you. And other times, this can make your hand worse. Other times, this card you literally can't resolve because you don't have enough waters in hand. That's why I really don't like this card specifically, although I've played it a lot in the past to some good success, so it's something you could definitely run. Abyss Sphere, searchable off of the Megalo. Again, all the Abyss spells and traps, all searchable off of Megalo, because when it summons, search Abyss spell or trap, right? Especially summon a Mermail monster from your deck, its effects are negated. You cannot activate any spell cards while it's face up. And then while this card leaves the field, destroy that monster. Destroy this card during your opponent's next end phase after activation. So, you know, the combo was, you know, summon out Lind, etc., etc. Pop it in the end phase, summon out something else, and continue to extend. Or another popular thing I see people do is they'll use this to summon out Pike, and then Pike will still activate, even though it says its effects are negated. You still can activate the effect. It says the effects can't be activated. It just says they're negated. So you can summon Pike, pitch infantry. You won't get to search off of Pike, but what you will do is trigger your infantry. And then if you're playing like some Hulk shenanigans, you know, you can use that level 4 that you're summoning with maybe like a Crystron Quandax to synchro into a level 8 like Dragite, or synchroing into Crystron Quarion Gandrax during the opponent's turn, right? There's some cool shenanigans you can do there. And then we have Sekka's Light. I remember playing Sekka Mermails for so long. Really liked it with Yazi and Destrudo and Mermail. But obviously Destrudo is banned, so that's not really a thing you can do. But if you really wanted to play a Monster Mash build of Mermail, have tons of water monsters in the main deck, have the Swap Engine, have the Undyne Engine, have, you know, Aqua Spirit, more Mermails, right? You could just definitely run Sekka's Light, because there are some bricks in the deck that you definitely want to be able to put back, like Controller, like Ronin Totem, etc. And then some extra deck options here. We have Crystron Quarion Gandrax. If this card is synchro summon, target monsters your opponent's controls or in their graveyard up to the number of synchro materials used for the synchro summon of this card, banish them. And then it says if the synchro summon card is destroyed by battle card effect, you can target one banished monster except this card and special summon it to your field. So it says 2 or more non-tuners plus a non-tuner monster. So you can pretty much always be guaranteed to banish 3. This card is pretty cool, but it does take a lot of setup. And then you have Trishula, just a standard card that you can play. Sometimes I find it better to make Crocodragon than this card, but if you want to go more Hand Loop Turbo, you can go with that route. Then you have the Ice Barrier monsters. These cards are obviously just great because they provide discard outlets and give you a really good opportunity to be able to, trigger Atlanteans. I guess save for Deloran, but Deloran can, do some cool things by returning Megalos or Tases back to the hand, all while gaining attack and then, giving you opportunities to discard more cards. But I think probably these two are a bit better to play within the deck, especially Brionek. Mass removal that it can offer is pretty nice. Krishan Quandax, just another level 4 that you could play, because sometimes you can synchro into this and then overlay with it. Like if Diva summons out, per se, infantry, right? And then you normal Prince as an additional normal. You can synchro into Quandax, and then if you get Dragoons on field at any point, you can overlay Quandax and Dragoons into like Bahamut Shark or something. Number 38, Hope Harbinger. So I'm going to go ahead and go back a little bit to Abyss Manor. We talked about how it can increase levels by 2 to make a rank 9 for your level 7 Mermails, but you can make them level 8. And what that allows you to do is to overlay with your Moulin. And number 38, of course, is a pretty good card to be able to overlay into. Or you can play like Sanafon, whatever it may be. Because once you overlay the Moulin, it's safe, right? Even if you detach the Moulin, right, you still don't lose your next battle phase because it's not being sent from the field. Things that are Ixies materials are not on the field anymore. So, it's a good way to be able to protect your Moulin if at all possible. Abyss Trite, old school target to be able to summon off of Bahamut Shark. And same thing with Nightmare Shark, I guess, too. It says when this card is special summon, you can attach 1 level 3 water from your hand or your side of the field to this card as Ixies material. But this card can just steal games sometimes just because that a direct attack or target any water monster control can attack directly this turn. Also, other monsters cannot attack. Cross Sheep. I would really only play this if you're playing Instant Fusion or if you're playing like Fusion Trish, because that's potentially another way to trigger it. Rare Fish and Sea Monster, we talked about those as just being Instant Fusion targets. And then the Deep Sea package. Deep Sea Aria. I love this card when it first released, but I've since cut it completely from the main deck. Just because I find that in the cases where like I was using it, like it just wasn't providing as much value as I thought. Although this potentially could make worse hands better, because if you just start something as simple as like swap discarding Teus or swap discarding something, you can just banish the water in the grave, search Deep Sea Diva, search Prince, whatever it may be. But I found sometimes you had to sacrifice, again, like a good extender like Teus, just to be able to make this card live. So I'm still on the fence about this card. I might put it back into the main deck and maybe at 1 or 3 copies in the future, anywhere between there. I'm not really sure, but just the whole Deep Sea package down here, of course, another engine that can be played, and I've already showed how it works. So I won't go into too much detail here about it. So these are a lot of other Texan engines that you could run in the Atlantean Mermail strategy. If you guys have any other cards to suggest, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. But that is going to wrap it up for this segment of the video. And we're going to move into the final segments where I'm just going to my overall closing thoughts on the deck as a whole. Alright, so welcome to the final segment of this video. And first I want to say that if you're still watching at this point, I really do appreciate it. I realize this is a very, very long video, and that a lot of people might not still be watching here. So if you are, I really appreciate it. And don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, if you've enjoyed the content thus far. But I have 5 points that I want to touch on here, just about Atlantean Mermail as a whole. And the first one is just the overall flexibility and just how malleable the strategy is. It seems like it can adopt a lot of mainstream meta strategies very, very easily that we've seen over the years, talking about Firewall, Orcus, and now with the Halka Fibrax shenanigans. But it just seems like there are just so many ways to build and play the deck, as you guys saw in the previous segment, with just how many different cards are at your disposal. And that's probably not even all the cards. There are probably so many other cards that you could include in your deck to make it your own and make it play all your own as well. You can make the deck go first, play combo or control, play more Mermails, play less Mermails, or you could try to blind second and try to break the opponent's board and OTK, because the deck has definitely been capable of doing that and is capable of doing that. So yeah, you have that going for it. There's just so many different ways to build and play it, which is really nice, because somebody who's been playing the deck for as long as I have, since about 2015, it really keeps the deck fresh. It keeps you from getting burnt out on it, which is really nice. It seems like every time I come back to revisit the deck, there's always some sort of new combo or new way that I can build to play the deck and enjoy, and the recent variation of that has been with this deep sea stuff. So really have been enjoying that. I like how the deck just, again, has so many different ways to play it, because it keeps it fun, and that's what's most important. Next thing I want to talk about is just the overall price point of the deck. Yes, the deck can be very, very expensive in max rarity, and while yes, it does look gorgeous, all the cards do the same thing in low rarity as they do in high rarity. It's important to remember that. So the deck can be very, very cheap, which is nice. That means it has really easy accessibility for a lot of the player base. And with that being said too, with how cheap it is at its lowest rarity, you still get a lot of bang for your buck, because again, it can be played in so many different ways. It is a deck that has definitely withstood the test of time over all of these years, and it still always seems to be somewhat viable as a rogue deck, and can be very, very competitive as well, so long as you learn the deck, understand your worst matchups, and make sure you build and side for those matchups accordingly, and even can give a lot of the tier 1 decks a good run for their money, as I've experienced that time and time again in the past with this deck. So not only can it be very, very cheap, but it's a really solid deck to invest in, just because of how much it can compete and how it continues to compete format after format. The next thing I want to talk about is the fact that I think this deck definitely has the ability to make you a better player overall. I would definitely recommend this deck to people who are trying to become better players, or people who are even new to the game, because there's a lot of things that this deck will teach you that will, again, help you to be just a better overall player, from niche rulings and learning about cost and how cards can miss timing and things like that, and also being able to play a deck that has a very rewarding play style, but also at the same time is a deck that can punish you. You really have to be careful on what you search and when you search it, how you sequence your plays, and those are very valuable things to learn, as they have carryover to a lot of other decks in the game. So this is a deck that can definitely just make you a better player overall. And the last thing I want to talk about, and probably the most important thing, is this deck is just so much fun to play. And not only that, the community around it is such a nice and welcoming community with so many amazing people in it. So yeah, that's the last thing I wanted to say. Mermail, absolutely fantastic deck. You know, there's a reason it's one of my favorite decks of all time, and there's also a reason I've been playing it for so long. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Again, thank you for making it this far to the video if you have, and again, leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Drop a comment down below also. And yeah, thank you guys again so much for watching. As always, Winterkill signing out. We'll see you guys in the next one. And of course, a huge shout out goes to our Divine level channel members here on YouTube, and they are Academic Thick, Zors, and Cadillacs84. Thank you guys so much for your continued and very generous support of the channel.